So that's all right. I think we're good. We are on Facebook. We are on LinkedIn. We should be on YouTube and all over the map. So I'm super pumped today. Let me just try and shut this down. Apologize for that. There we go. Now it's out of my way. I'm not distracted. Drop me a note in the comments. Let me know you guys are here. I am super excited today to have the guest that we have on. Samara and I connected, I don't know, quite some time ago. I had written an article in CBC that went a little bit viral, and Samara thought, hey, here's a dude talking about some cool stuff. I should reach out to this guy and see what he's all about. So we ended up having a fantastic conversation on one of her shows, one of her workshops that she puts on. So without further ado, I am going to introduce you to Samara, and I'll let her introduce herself. Hey, how you doing, my friend?
I am doing well. How are you? So thrilled to be here.
It is so good to have you. This is so long overdue. I think about you quite often and think, you know what? That's a lady I need to have on our show.
Mutual.
Good stuff. So tell us a little bit about who you are.
Oh my gosh, where do I start? There's a lot of hats that I wear, as you know, but more than others. I guess I'm an international speaker. I'm an author. I do a lot of work around gender-based violence, around mental health, resilience building, etc. So I work with a lot of individuals, organizations, and companies as a consultant and speaker as well. And I'm a mom. I have 2 daughters. That's a big part of my identity, and they're 19 and 14 and my best friends. And I'm also a domestic abuse survivor, and I run a nonprofit, which is a mentorship program to help women who've escaped violence to help them build better lives after any kind of abuse or trauma. So lots of different work, lots of different things that I do, but it all comes from that same place of passion that we can all do our part to make a difference, and I'm trying to do my little part.
Your little part. So tell us, give us, I don't know, as much or as little as you want of your story. Sort of what got you to this place? Like, why do you care about this stuff?
Oh, wow. Well, I grew up in Abu Dhabi. I'm from a Pakistani Muslim background. And I was 16 years old when I was forced into marriage with a much older man who was an absolute stranger who lived in Canada. And that's how I came to Canada, as a child bride in a forced marriage. And that marriage was extremely abusive and oppressive. And I wasn't allowed to have freedom, make friends, go out of the house, pursue my education. But there was always this voice in my head that was, life is supposed to be better. Like there should be more to this. It can't possibly just end here or like this. And I had this voice, and I wanted to go to school, and I just couldn't shake it off. Like I want to go to school. I want to get an education. So I fought for my education. I finished my high school courses through distance learning. And then I started a home daycare to save money for my tuition fee for university, because I wasn't allowed to go out and get a job. That was not allowed for women in our family. And saved money on the side secretly, and eventually started university. And that's where I started getting confidence. I was being treated with kindness and respect for the very first time in my life. And I was like, maybe I'm not so bad, and maybe there is a better life out there. And a lot of people who came into my life at that point, my friends, my professors, my mentors, gave me that gift of hope that there exists a better future. And eventually I left the marriage. I was in my second year of undergrad when I left, and I was 28, and I had 2 children, very young children at that time, 10 and 5. And I went into campus housing, was working multiple jobs, raising my girls, and going to school full time. And eventually I graduated as the top student in the entire university. And that is when this hit me most, I think, because all that recognition was amazing. The money was helpful, but it was the validation that I got that I was not crazy, that I was not wrong to believe in my dreams, that, there is a better future. There are better people out there. Like I can have a better life. And everything that I've been told from such a young age about what my gender role is and the box that I have to fit into and all of that was all a lie. So I wanted to do something to help. And I also knew that my story isn't just my story. My story is that of millions and millions of women and girls around the world, including here in Canada. And I just wanted to do my part to make a difference. So I started sharing my story. Honestly, Mike, it was like little events that I would go to and literally beg organizers. Like I would literally be begging you, Mike, can I please be on your show? I can just have 10 minutes. Maybe there's something I'll say that will resonate with someone. And that was me. And it just snowballed from there. And a few years ago, I was asked to write an article for Toronto Life magazine that went viral. And then I got a book deal out of it, and then I wrote my book, and the book came out last year, and I'll show you a copy in a bit. But after that, and now the book is being adapted to a TV series, and I'm embarking on writing my second book. So all of that has really happened organically, but also I think it's not like I orchestrated any of it, but it came from a journey and I guess a commitment to be true to who I was and be vulnerable and have that courage to put myself out there, that this isn't just my story. I want to do my part, and silence has to be broken to create any kind of difference. So that courage, I guess, even though it was scary to put my story out there, but it was also like, this is the right thing to do. So yes, I'm afraid, I'm going to do it anyway. And it just snowballed from there, and here we are.
You know what? There's so much to unpack there. I love it. Like, first off, just the power in sharing your story, to come back to that's where it all started for you, is just having the courage to share your story and how that snowballed into this. Again, I don't want to paint this sort of social media rosy picture, but seems to me to be a pretty incredible journey compared to where you came from. And it all stems from, again, having that courage to share your story and be vulnerable. As I think you well know, on this show, we talk a lot about vulnerability and the importance of that for men in particular, because again, I feel like women get this a little quicker than us guys do, and sometimes we need to have a bigger conversation around that. So, that period.
Not me.
What's that?
I said you said it, not me.
Yeah, well, it's true. It's true. And it's hard, right? And, there's all this societal pressure and conditioning that, we're not supposed to be vulnerable. We're supposed to be strong. And, again, conflating that vulnerability as weakness is just such a poor stereotype. So one of the other things that you touched on that I just want to circle back to is that hope piece. And I love that. And it's funny for me because it's a bit of a divergence from often what I talk about, because in a business context, I talk a lot about hope is a friggin' terrible business strategy, right? So, because I'm always talking about, as leaders, how do we design and put forward.
Yeah,
exactly. And so, I hope my product does well. And I always talk about how hope is such a terrible business strategy. But when it comes to life,
I would agree with that, but keep going.
Sorry?
I would disagree with that, but keep going. You have to have that hope that no matter how much you plan and project, things can go wrong and unexpectedly hit you. And in that time, hope is the thing that prevails. Absolutely.
And that's where I was coming back to, because you're right. You absolutely do need to have hope. And in particular, for the thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of women that find themselves in similar situation. Oftentimes, and you know what? And let's equate this to men as well. Different circumstances, different situations, but oftentimes hope is the only thing that keeps us alive.
Absolutely.
And so it is absolutely a powerful thing.
And I think it's also the best gift that you could give somebody. We have a weekly family pizza night with me and my girls, and we were last summer we were walking to Yonge and Dundas Square in Toronto.
Yeah.
Got our pizza and ate and everything. We had some leftovers and we were coming back, And my daughter stopped in the middle of the street to give our leftover pizza to some of the people, the homeless that were sitting on the street. And one woman, she just beamed and she said, "Thank you, honey. It's my birthday today, so this is a real treat." And I wished her happy birthday, and exchanged a few pleasantries. And then I started walking further. And the next thing I know, I hear a loud happy birthday song. And I turn around, and both my daughters are just literally like loudly singing, belting out happy birthday. And others joined in for this beautiful woman, Michelle. And I in my like I think that is the absolute biggest proud mommy moment that I can ever have. I was just standing there in awe of my daughters, and just the smile that they put on that woman's face. And then my older daughter said something to me that was so powerful. And she said, "Mom, even if you can't solve someone's problems, even if you can't solve something or give them something, you don't have any material thing to give them, just stop and acknowledge and smile. Because there can be nothing worse than being in pain and feeling that you're invisible and no one cares."
Yeah, absolutely.
And I certainly think in my journey, a lot of the things that I remember are those little moments of kindness that gave me hope. This was about a year and a half into my marriage, or 2 years into my marriage, and the abuse was at its absolute worst. Lots of emotional abuse. I wasn't allowed to go out anywhere from my home, except to this nearby play center, like where you could take your children and drop in and all. So that was the only place I could go. And I would take my daughter there like about once or twice a week. And one day as I was coming back, my daughter started to ask for a donut. And there was a Tim Hortons on the way. I never had any money on me, but sometimes I would find like loonies and toonies lying around at home, and I would put them in my purse. And so I was absolutely sure that I had a toonie in my purse. So I went into Tim's and I got in line, got the donut, and I put my hand in my purse and I just couldn't find the toonie. And I was absolutely horrified and mortified. And I turned to my daughter, she's already bit into the donut, so I can't even return it. And there was this really wonderful, kind man, this voice that I heard behind me, "Ma'am, can I buy you a coffee? And can I buy her the donut?" And he paid for it. And he probably doesn't even remember me, but I will never forget him because in that moment, even though I felt horrible and embarrassed and all of those things, and I went out of the Tim's and I was crying because I felt so powerless, but there was also that glimmer of hope that there are kind people in this world, and there are people who will hold me if I were to fall, and it's not going to be all horrible if I left. And I didn't leave for another 10 years or like 8 years, but that person will always stay with me. And that moment stayed with me. And it was little moments like these that gave me eventually the courage years later to be able to leave. Because the one thing that abuse does is makes you feel that you're isolated and you're all alone. So the more we give to each other, the more we give hope to each other,
Yes.
and make each other feel that we're not alone. That's what creates resilience, because resilience is not individual. I always say resilience is collective, and it's created through authentic human connections. And to create those authentic human connections, we absolutely need to allow ourselves to be seen, which is vulnerability, right?
Yeah, and then so let's talk about that in the context of dudes. Why is that important for men, or why do you think that's important for men? Like I said, I've got my opinions and I share them lots, but I would love to hear it from you. Well, first off, do you think that's important for men?
Absolutely. I think it's important for everybody. And in this context, absolutely, it's important for men. In fact, even more so. I mean, think about how so many men are growing up and so many boys are growing up thinking that emotions are bad. Emotions, being emotional, being sensitive, being vulnerable is a sign of weakness. And what does that entail? What does that result in is a lack of empathy. Because if you cannot understand your own emotions, and you don't have an emotional vocabulary to be able to express, define, and understand your feelings, how on earth are you going to be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes and understand their feelings? right? And that is the definition of empathy, to be able to put ourselves in someone else's shoes and feel with them. But if you can't even feel your own emotions, and you're taught to ignore them or brush them under the rug or suppress them, then you're obviously not going to have that empathy for other people. And empathy is the cornerstone of humanity. In fact, the biggest trait that abusers have is a lack of empathy.
Right.
And we see that among a lot of powerful people. I'm not going to name any names.
Timely conversation, isn't it?
And it's mainly because I think as young, and that's a big factor, that as young boys and young men, they're grown and they're raised to think that emotions are bad, and women are emotional, men aren't. But then that suppressed emotion later on comes out in life. So that's one reason. And secondly, even for men's, not just because they would end up as abusers or not, but even just for your own mental health and well-being. Like, if you're not allowing yourselves to be seen for who you are, how are you going to create those authentic connections, not just with other people, but even with yourself? How are you going to feel connected with yourself? That results in a whole host of other issues, like anxiety, like, feeling like you're not in place in your own skin, feeling inadequate, comparing yourself to other people all the time, attaching your self-worth to your accomplishments. And, it leads to a whole host of other insecurities. Like, if we're not connected with ourselves and with our feelings, and we are emotional beings, no matter how much we try to run away from it, we are social creatures. So if we're not even connected with our own feelings and emotions, then that becomes a very weak foundation for relationships with other people. And then it leads, a lonely person can be surrounded by a crowd of people and still be lonely. Because you feel that something missing in your life, and you're missing those connections, and connection and attachment is not just a nice to have for human beings, it is a must have. It's part of our survival mechanism. It's part of our thriving mechanism. So if you're not feeling that connection with other people, it's because of that lack of vulnerability and lack of connection that you have with yourself. And for that, we need to allow ourselves to be emotional and to feel and have and by emotional, what I mean is also having the vocabulary and the toolkit to be able to understand who we are, understand our feelings, and be able to talk about them, and realize that courage and strength and confidence does not mean the absence of fear and self-doubt and sadness. Happiness is not the absence of sadness. Happiness is a choice. Courage is a choice. Confidence is a choice. And it's not a choice you make once. It's a choice you make every single day, consistently, in many, many moments. It's like knowing that, yes, I'm afraid to leave this job and start off my own business. But yes, I know that fear is there. I embrace that fear. I also know this is the right thing for me to do, so I'm going to take that step. Or courage looks like, yes, my daughter is struggling or my son is struggling, and it's a difficult conversation, and I'm afraid that I might make things worse, or they might shun me. But I also know this is the right thing to do, so I'm going to have the courage to sit down with them and have that conversation. Courage is like, I want to go to therapy, and I know that I have to deal with this trauma that I suffered. But people might raise eyebrows and think I'm less of a man, but I know that I need help, and this is for my own growth. So I'm going to choose to act with courage and go and seek that help that I know I need. Right.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that's a really, really important distinction. I want to just circle back and highlight what you just said. I wrote a piece maybe a month ago called "The Fallacy of Fearless," because that's one thing. It's
fearless. None of us are fearless. None of us are.
Exactly. So this quest for fearlessness drives me nuts.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't exist. So it should be a quest for courage rather than a quest for fearlessness.
Absolutely. Yeah. And fearlessness is such a, I guess, a convoluted concept, as if fear is bad. I mean, fear is actually healthy. Fear is what, keeps us from jumping out of planes without parachutes. I have jumped out of a plane, but I did have a parachute. Fear is what keeps us from going into a dark alley at night where we know that the crime rate is super high, right? Like fear actually is a healthy emotion that keeps us from doing stupid things. But fear is also comes from a sense of nervousness and uncertainty, and it's going into an unknown territory in your career or in your family, or putting yourself out there and telling somebody how you feel about them, or all these things that are laying people off or getting laid off or whatever. Like, we're going through a pandemic right now. We don't know what's going to happen. That causes fear and anxiety. So, the more we run away from it, that this is a bad thing and being afraid makes me weak, then you're basically rejecting your humanity, right? So the more we embrace it, that yes, this is making me afraid. I don't want to be in this relationship, and leaving it is making me feel afraid because I don't know what lies ahead. But I'm going to act with courage in this moment, knowing that I don't know, I don't have all my ducks in a row. I don't know what lies ahead, but I'm going to have that faith that it will turn out, and faith in my abilities that I will figure it out, right? So, like, fear is not a bad thing. As long as you are aware of where that fear is coming from. Is it coming from a place of excitement and things, and it's holding you back from doing something that you really want to do? Or is it coming from a place of, danger sign, don't do this, and then you shouldn't do that, right?
Well, but that comes back to what you were talking about earlier with, and especially as men, I always circle back to the male context. We've been taught to bury, suppress, and avoid all these negative feelings, the less desirable ones. And as a result, as you said, with fear, if we just bury it and dismiss it as if it's a bad thing, we don't get to examine it. And what then happens is we start making decisions based on fear, but we're not really aware of that. So we're making all these snap decisions, judgments, behaviors coming from a place of fear. Whereas if we allow that to come up, we open up to that fear and really just be able to, unpack it, examine it, look at it and say, okay, where does that come from? What does that feel like? What's that all about? Then we can make that choice. As you said, okay, is this fear? Yeah, I'm standing on the edge of a cliff without a parachute. I should probably step back. Or is that fear that, okay, I've got a parachute on. I've decided this is something I want to do. I do need to jump off this cliff. Right?
Yeah, and that's the thing, that taking your precautions, making informed decisions. I'll give an example of like when I was leaving my marriage, for example. There were a number of times I tried to leave, but I was sent back, or I went back because of fear. And sometimes that fear was, I don't have money, I don't have the support system, and I don't have any kind of knowledge about my rights and things like that. And where will I go? I have young kids, and those fears were legitimate. But every time that I acted from a place of courage to try one more time to leave, it gave me more information of what I needed to ultimately be successful. So, when I left and it was money that held me back, or when I was trying to leave, then I knew that I needed to make some money, and then I needed to get an education. So I worked on those things until, after 10 years of marriage, I was in a position where I did have some support. I was a student in university. I knew I could get OSAP. I was aware of some of my rights in this country, and that's what gave me that. I guess I gave myself the permission to be able to then leave. So, the only person you need permission from, the first person you need permission from, is yourself to do anything. So it's really about making informed decisions. The more information you have, that yes, I'm standing in, at the edge of this cliff. I have my parachute. I have taken precautions. I have a great instructor. I know that there are other people doing it, and I'm in this together. I have friends with me who are cheering for me. I know that I want to really experience this. So yes, I'm afraid. It's scary, but I'm going to do it. When I went skydiving, it was like that. Like I asked my instructor all kinds of questions. I'm like, how many parachutes do we have? He's like, we have 2, but we're only going to use 1. And then I saw other people jumping off, and I was like, yes, and I asked him, like, how many skydives have you done before that? He's like, more than 10,000. I'm like, okay, what
Oh,
are the
wow.
odds that I'll be your first ever accident? Probably very low, right? So that doesn't mean I wasn't afraid. I mean, it's jumping off a plane, it's scary, right? But I also know I really, really want to do this, and I want to experience this in my life, so I did it. Similarly, just a few weeks ago, I was in Alberta and in Jasper actually, and I wanted to go swimming at sunrise in an icy lake,
Mm.
and I did, and it was scary. And first of all, I'm not a swimmer, but second of all, like I was just like, I get really, really cold. I grew up in a desert in Abu Dhabi, right? So I get super cold. But I was like, this is something I want to experience. Was I nervous? Absolutely. But it was that, yes, I'm going to choose to act from a place of courage and bravery and do this because I really want to. But that doesn't mean, you make reckless decisions and you do things that are wrong and where there's healthy fear. So I think the key is to distinguish between healthy fear that's keeping you back from doing dumb things,
Yeah.
and fear that's really almost a form of like that adrenaline nervousness kind of thing we need, and where that fear is holding you back, and then you're like, no, yes, I'm afraid, now I'm going to make that choice what I'm going to do, right?
Yeah.
So choice is yours. The fear is not in your control, but your choice is in your control. That's where your power lies.
Yeah, and that's again circling back to that critical piece with the emotions. If we don't understand those emotions, if we're not aware of them, then we can't make the choice.
Absolutely.
Because it becomes automatic. So, somebody I'd asked the other day about what were some of the biggest, because I share lessons and stories all the time. So I was curious with my Facebook friends, what were some of the key ones that you've taken away from some of the stories I've shared? And one of the ladies who I have worked with for probably a decade or more had said that not only is it okay for men to feel, but in fact, it's life-changing. And so I want to highlight that because it's so much more than, because we do tend to beat this drum about, it's okay for men to feel, it's okay for men to cry. Well, in fact, it's more than okay. Like, it is life-changing. And when you talk about having the courage to step through that fear, the richness of experience of life, and again, that's what sort of triggered this for me when you talked about you wanted that experience. Just the richness of experience that you can create in your life when you do that is profound, and it's unbelievable. So I want to.
Yeah, I'm just gonna like touch on that because it sets you free. It actually it liberates you because you realize that your vulnerability is your strength. It's not a weakness. It's not you've been holding yourself back, and lack of vulnerability, or if you're not vulnerable, basically you're putting yourself into a box because you're pretending or trying to be who you think you're supposed to be instead of who you actually are.
Yeah, it is absolutely the key that unlocks that door.
Absolutely. And when you allow yourself to be who you are, it's actually so liberating. Like I know that personally because I grew up in a family and in a culture, and then was married into a family where I was told that this is the box that you have to fit in. Don't color outside of the lines, and you're a good wife and a good mom and a good daughter-in-law and all of that. But Samra was lost in all of that.
Yeah.
And when Samra came out, and today I am who I am, it is so liberating, and there's no way that I will ever be able to go back, and I don't want to, because it's just so freeing that yes, this is who I always was. This is who I always was meant to be. It's almost like breaking free from a cage. It's magical.
Yeah, we yesterday we talked about as men we sort of wear this weighted vest.
Yeah.
And it's this armor, this mask. But yeah, yesterday we were talking about it in terms of a weighted vest, and when you can actually take that weighted vest off, how much lighter things are, and you can truly show up and be who you are. It's just absolutely incredible and magical. I want to circle back a little to your story before I have to let you go. How long ago was this?
I left my marriage 10 years ago.
Okay.
So I was married in 1999.
Right.
And I had just turned 17.
Right. So but that doesn't happen in Canada anymore, right?
Oh, it does. Oh my God.
Well, but this is what I wanted to highlight, because that for me was like, come on, that's stuff that happened in the 40s, 50s, and
Did you
like,
see my post a few days ago?
no, I didn't.
Okay, so I actually put a post on social media that and people get shocked when I say this. Child marriage is legal in Canada.
Oh, I did see that. Yes.
Yeah. And there have been, in the last 18 or so years, over almost 4,000 cases of marriage licenses issued in Canada for minors. And these are not, high school sweethearts in love. Oh, 16-year-old kids, let's get them married. These are underage girls with much older men. One particular case was a 16-year-old girl married to a 51-year-old man in New Brunswick. And these are cases of, not just immigrants, but all over, like every possible community you can imagine. And it comes from a host of other things. Like it's very high in Indigenous populations and people who are coming in from those parts of the world where it's acceptable. And this is an underreported number because it doesn't even take into account, this is just the marriage licenses issued. So we're not taking into account the women that are brought in here as child brides, like myself, or the kids that are taken back home and the marriages are performed somewhere abroad, and then they come back, or even the countless marriages that are performed in mosques and synagogues and religious institutions, but never registered legally.
Right. Yes.
So the 4,000 is just a fraction of the actual real problem. So this isn't something that happened long time ago, or happens in different other parts of the world, and it doesn't touch us. Since I wrote my book, I've been going around the country doing a lot of speeches in book clubs, and I've heard countless stories from teachers, from educators, from young girls who are survivors, that that this is happening right under our noses in our country. There was one teacher who told me that there's a girl in her class in grade 11, and there's a new some new family every week that comes to see her to see if she's eligible to be a bride for their son. And the girl's own mother makes her vacuum in front of these random families to prove that she's good wife material. This is a girl born and raised here in Cambridge, Ontario. So this is the world we're living in, and this is happening right under our noses, and no one wants to speak up because it's their culture, it's their religion. And since when are we overlooking human rights violations in the name of culture and religion? And and we as a country stand up for human rights, and we want to help end child marriage abroad, whereas we're hypocritical in our efforts because it happens in our country.
Right.
So I think there's a lot that needs to be done, and it's important to come together as a community. And again, I always speak about male allyship, and you're such a strong example of that this isn't a woman's issue. This is all of us versus the issue of gender-based violence.
Right. So as a dude, why should I care from your perspective?
Do you have a daughter?
Yes.
That's why you should care. Do you have a girlfriend?
Yes.
That's why you should care. Are you a human being who wants to live in a better and more equitable world?
Yeah.
That's why you should care.
Absolutely. So what can we as men do? Because I've got to imagine there are people listening that are now just shaking their no, she didn't just say that. Did she really? No, that can't really. And I can guarantee you there's going to be some people that hop off this and they're going to start doing some Google searches. Oh my God, that actually is true. This is crazy. So understanding that this happens today, understanding that this is true, understanding that we as men care and want to make a difference, what can we do?
I think the first step is to raise your voices and express your support very publicly, which you do really well, Mike. You're like, I see your social media and I follow you all the time, and you're very, very vocal. It's to rally men and educate them that this is not just a girls or a women's issue. This is an all of us issue, and we should all care. So that's the first step. It's always breaking the silence. And then I think in this particular case, the first step for all of us is to urge the policymakers to outlaw this. That this shouldn't be happening. That sends a huge signal to the entire community that this is unacceptable in our country, and hopefully will be a domino effect for other countries to follow. In 48 of 50 states in America, child marriage is legal. So a girl under the age of 18 cannot vote, cannot buy alcohol, cannot get a credit card, buy property, even hire a lawyer in some cases, but she can be forced to enter the most important legal contract of her life, which is marriage, all with the signature of a parent or a legal guardian. And I was one of those girls, right? And I came from Pakistan. My marriage happened in Pakistan. But this continues to happen here. And whenever I tell people, they get shocked. And so the first to break the silence, to raise awareness, to talk to other dudes around you that this is unacceptable, we need to do something, and then to rally our voices together. And I'm going to be coming up with some initiatives, and I'm looking into starting a petition and sending a huge letter to Minister of Women and Gender Equality, and saying that this should not happen in our country, and we have to change the law. I mean, it's table stakes. This is just In fact, before 2015, the law was 14 years old.
Yeah,
that was the minimum age, and then Harper government raised it to 16.
16. That's right. I remember when that happened. That's right. I remember think like, are you kidding me? That's what we're doing?
It should be 18, no exception. Minimum 18. I mean, in my opinion, it should be a lot higher, but at least 18, because that's the age of majority. A girl can be literally dragged into a mosque, and I'm right now mentoring a woman like that. Like, she lives in Vancouver. At the age of 16, her father took her to a mosque, picked up some marriage license kit from a drugstore shelf, signed off for her, and it was a perfectly legal marriage, and no one batted an eyelid. And sometimes people say, well, maybe if they go in front of a judge, well, what do you think? A girl is going to say in front of a judge and that I don't want to do this, and piss off her dad and her entire family who've conditioned her from such a young age to think that this is the right thing for her. No. Right? So it's gotta stop. And the first thing to stop it is to make it illegal. And then comes a place of raising awareness and talking to other dudes that this is not acceptable. Like, I say child marriage is legalized pedophilia.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it always occurs in domestic violence, because what is domestic abuse? It's control. And child marriage is already starting from a place of control, right? It's already starting from that a woman, the girl is underage, dependent, completely controlled by an older man. So even if it doesn't result in physical violence, it will result in all kinds of other violence, because violence is about being violated. It's not just about kicks and punches. So raising awareness, talking to people, and bringing these conversations out from under the rug and putting them out there. I think that's the first thing, and the biggest thing. I think every change starts at the grassroots level.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's mind-boggling to me. Like, how is this even debatable?
Yeah, I know. If you go on my LinkedIn post, there's a couple of comments there that people have, like, I don't see anything wrong with a 16-year-old girl getting married. Like, I'm like, really? And these are people in Canada. I'm not going to name names. And there's actually one comment that was there that I didn't think this was real, but I went and did my research, and you're absolutely right, and I'm absolutely shocked. Right. So I know that people will go and do. And I urge you, please do your research. Yeah. There are articles out there, and I've just recently done an article which I shared on my LinkedIn. So take a look at that. Like, it's actually pretty horrific, and this is just a sliver of things that continue to happen in the name of culture and religious freedom. And like I said, these are human rights violations. And yes, I stand for cultural and religious freedom. I'm an immigrant in this country myself, but although that freedom should never, ever come at the cost of human rights. And some people ask me and say, well, what if he turned out to be a good husband? It would be okay. And my answer to that is, well, is that the only purpose of a girl's life, is to find a good husband? What about my childhood that I lost? What about my innocence? What about my adolescence, my right to grow up and make my own decisions and decide when to get married and who to get married to, or if and when to have children, or go to concerts with friends? All that's lost. I'll never get it back. And that is why this should never happen. Same thing with any person who lives, and I'm going to generalize it today now by all genders, right? Like, we're talking about vulnerability, and it is our birthright as human beings to be accepted and respected and loved for who we are.
Yes.
Like, it's unequivocally our birthright. And when we are trained by society and by others around us to fit into certain boxes in order to fit in order to be acceptable, that's just toxic. And that's what's wrong with a lot of our society today.
Yes.
That's, and whether you're a man or you're a woman or you're identify with another gender, whatever, you are absolutely acceptable and lovable and respectable as who you are. But it starts with giving ourselves that love and respect and permission first. And that is that healthy connection with yourself comes from being empowered and having the courage to be vulnerable.
So for a couple of like takeaways. So, I always struggle with sometimes these messages we hear over and over and over again. And so they just become these meaningless platitudes. Love yourself first. I think we absolutely hear that a lot, and 100%, put your own oxygen mask on first, all that kind of stuff. But what are some practices that you do or advise that people can put into place to actually get there? Because it's easy to say, it's not always so easy to do.
Sometimes people confuse self-love with selfishness. Self-love is the furthest thing from selfishness. Self-love doesn't mean that me first and everybody else last. Self-love actually means I love myself so much that I want to project and give that same love and radiate that same love towards other people. When you hear things like you can't love yourself, you can't love other people, or you can't accept love in yourself unless you give it to yourself first. There's truth to that, because I'm a mom and I love my children to pieces. They mean the world to me, but I also love myself first. Which means that that enables me to be a much better mother, and it enables me to be a much better role model for my children, that this is the kind of relationship that they should have with themselves. Like, if I am so loving yourself means allowing yourselves to be who you are, to be authentic. And when you are authentic, when you are who you are, you give others around you the permission to be who they are. And you're able to put yourself in their shoes and feel with them. And that is what creates even more love for other people
and connection.
And that connection, right?
I love that. So we circle back to vulnerability and empathy and connection. Like, it's this full circle when we're looking for deeper connection, because as you said earlier, as human beings, we are hardwired for connection.
Absolutely. And, some of the things that I do to build that is journaling and having an emotional vocabulary that's expansive instead of just 3 words: anger, rage, and distrust or something. So having a more robust emotional vocabulary, practicing gratitude, self-talk is a big one, because we often judge ourselves so much. We often are very harsh on our own self. Like, if my daughter makes a mistake, I will say, it's okay. Everyone makes mistakes. You move on, you learn from it, and you keep growing, right? Whereas if I make a mistake, I would be like, oh my God, I'm so stupid, and what have I done? And I'm going to crash and burn. Like, we are very hard on ourselves. And it's what I've been practicing diligently is to catch myself in that moment and say, I'm going to talk to myself as I would talk to my daughter or my best friend, right? So talk to yourself as you would talk to a loved one. And change that internal self-dialogue. And sometimes it means that standing in front of a mirror and giving yourself a pep talk. And I do that a lot. Like, when I was in my marriage, the whole world was against me, and I wasn't allowed to go to school. And I was actually told that if going to school is selfish, and I had no hope of ever being able to go to university, but I would still stand in front of a mirror quite often and practice my graduation speech that I would one day deliver.
Nice.
And it happened 10 years later. So sometimes it means self-love means believing in yourself when even no one around you is believing in you. And eventually you will find your personal cheerleading squad. You will build it. And then it's also about surrounding yourself with the right people and having boundaries in place. Like that's been a big one for me because especially with my mother, like she doesn't understand me, she doesn't support me. And there was a long time, many years, when I tried to fit in and win her approval, and it was just causing me a lot of pain. And today I've evolved into like, you know what, Mom, I want you in my life, but these are topics that are off limits, and you cannot make me feel bad about myself, right? So I've had to develop those boundaries, that this is where I'm going to keep that person and not let them any closer, whoever it may be. And that takes a lot of courage, because we're taught to be approved by others. We often look at others for approval instead of look at ourselves. So look for your own approval. If you don't have your own approval, then that approval from other people is absolutely meaningless. And I always say, if you're not getting what you need to be completely yourself from the people around you, you're not asking for the wrong things. You're asking the wrong people.
Yes.
To change your people.
Yeah. I love that. Well, and that's Michelle and I talk about that often when we talk about relationships. That was one of the things we did pretty much on date one, was we set those boundaries. Here's who I am. Here's what I'm willing to accept in my life. And here's what I'm not willing to accept in my life.
And that comes from a place of self-awareness, which comes from a place of self-love, that you love yourself enough to get to know yourself. And I always say, do a PhD in you,
Yes. Yes. Well, I love that, because again, that comes back to that with awareness comes choice.
Yeah.
And when you start to really know yourself, and that's always the challenge. And I get asked this a lot. So, we talk about being authentic, we talk about being more you, but Mike, how do I know who I am? And so it starts with that exploration.
Like when I got out of my marriage, and yes, I was in a couple of relationships that were unhealthy and not physically abusive, but there was just simply because my own benchmark for relationships was so low that, anyone better than that looked amazing. And I still was feeling really weird. I'm like, no, this is not something I want. And I had trouble saying no and setting boundaries, and all that comes from, post-trauma. And I worked really hard on that. I've been in therapy. I worked on myself really, really hard, because I was like, I want to really heal from this, and I want to have space in my life for healthy love and for what I deserve, instead of what I'm made to feel that that's the best I can get. And that comes from a place of self-awareness. So I describe that period of a few years as if like I was actually dating myself.
Yes.
I traveled, I went and had other experiences in life. I still am a big solo traveler. And every time I do things with me, I learn about me. And when you're so content in your own company that you don't need someone, you want someone. Yes, that's great. And then you won't settle for someone who's just, whether it's a friendship or a relationship or whatever it is, you're not going to settle for people and have them in your life just for the sake of it because you're lonely. You're going to only accept people in your life who are right for you, who are your champions and your cheerleaders, who are in your life for the right reasons. So you're again, I say, like, when you love yourself wholeheartedly, you're not going to accept anything less than that from other people.
Yeah, I love that. Date yourself first. Date yourself, fall in love with yourself, and then you can go out there.
Company. I am my favorite person. I love, and I have amazing friends, and I treat them that way too, that I just adore them and I would do anything for them. And that's what they would do too. So when you have that healthy relationship with yourself, that's what makes you much more loving and kinder to other people too, because you're able to set your boundaries that way.
It's been a really interesting evolution for me, because I kind of did the same thing. After I split with my wife, I took 3 years and just dated myself, and really got to know myself. I found yoga, I found meditation, and really looked inward. But then what I realized was what was missing was that vulnerability piece. And vulnerability, by definition, you can't practice alone. You need somebody else to do that with, because I can't be vulnerable to myself. I know all my stuff. So that was interesting for me. And that's when,
you can journal, you can really put your own thoughts out there and things, and you can. But yes, the courage, I guess, the action part of it comes from being able to put yourself out there.
Right. But like I say, for me, that was the evolution. And that's what actually started Connected Men,
Yeah.
where we actually create a space where guys can get together and be vulnerable in a safe group environment. And the magic that happens, the connection that happens when we do that is just unbelievable. All right, my friend, we've gone real long. I love this conversation. I could talk to you all day. So where can people find you if they want to follow your work, find out what you're all about, and dive a little deeper? And yeah, maybe tell us what's the name of your book to start.
Oh, my book is called A Good Wife: Escaping the Life I Never Chose. If you give me a second, I'm gonna grab it.
Yes, please.
So it is right here. That's the book. And that's available on Amazon, on Indigo, and all bookstores mainly. And I'm embarking on my second book. This one is being adapted to a TV series, so I'm really excited about that. And I do a lot of work on social media. I do a lot of videos, and hopefully launching a podcast soon as well, which I need your help with to figure out the mechanics. But LinkedIn is very strong on LinkedIn, and I post quite a bit of stuff, or Instagram. So LinkedIn, just find me by my name, Samra Zafar. Instagram handle is I am Samra Zafar, and my website is samrazafar.com. Very, very easily findable. And also, I love hearing from people. So please write to me. You're not going to be bothering me. You're not going to be bugging me. It's a gift. And I always respond, even though I may not respond right away that same day. But I always take out time in my week to make sure that I'm responding to people who write to me. So please do.
That's awesome. You know what? There's so much power in connection. I mean, again, even the way you and I connected,
I know.
Just reaching out.
I've read his article. I don't know if he'll respond to me, but you know what? I'm just going to send in a message, and here we are, right?
and here we are, and I am so grateful that we are here, and I look forward to doing more work with you. We gotta stay in touch and do more things, because
I know there's just so much we can do together. So
I know. Well, and I think I sold my business in December, so this is it for me. This is I'm here and I'm in, man.
I left my banking job just a month ago, so
that's right.
Now I have all kinds of time for creativity. And
well, it was funny because as you were talking about courage and leaving it, and I'm thinking, are you sharing this from personal experience? Because I kind of think you are.
Yeah, because I mean, it was scary, right? I'm a single mom. I've got 2 children who are dependent on me. I mean, they're older now, but still quite financially they're dependent. So that stable income coming in, and plus we're in the middle of a pandemic. So I'm not speaking as much.
Speaking gig is real good right now.
Although I'm getting booked quite often for virtual speaking gigs, which is good. But for a while it was completely dead. So yes, it was scary, but I also knew that there are so many things I want to do now. And I'm working on launching an online course on these topics that we just talked about, on that relationship with yourself, resilience, vulnerability, connection, and all of that. I'm working on a bunch of things. And I was like, but I can't do all of that if I'm hanging on to this bank job that I don't like, but I'm hanging on to it just because it pays the bills. So I can do all this other, yes, it is scary, but I have enough trust in my abilities that I'll figure it out.
You've loaded up the parachute. You've taken the lessons.
And my daughter said to me, Mom, you figured it out when you had nothing, no education, broke, almost homeless, working 5 minimum wage jobs. What makes you think you can't figure it out now? Right? So I was like, you know what? Right. So I've loaded up the parachute. I obviously was prepared. I saved, and I made sure that, things, at least I'm not going to be out on the streets or something like that. But then it was a matter of choosing to act from courage, rather than that fear of, oh my gosh, no paycheck, what am I going to do, etc. What does it look like? I don't have all my ducks in a row. Well, guess what? You never will have all your ducks in a row. You'll never have all the answers beforehand. There's going to be always unexpected stuff being thrown at you. But the more agile and flexible you are, the more resilient you are. And resilience is not about, having all kinds of success and not failing. Resilience is about getting back up and trying one more time. It's about being flexible. In fact, my favorite I'm a big Oprah fan, and one of my favorite things that she said in her book, The Path Made Clear, was that life is like a river, and you never know what's around the other bend. You never know, there's a big boulder or a waterfall or a little dead pool or a little crevice or a big roadblock or something like that, right? You never know what's coming up. But the more water-like, the more fluid you are,
Right.
the easier it will be for you to get through all of those obstacles and reach your source, or reach the ocean. So you are, as human beings, that's the key, is not to control what's going to happen, but to be flexible and let life happen and realize that your power lies in being true to yourself as you're going through life. So that's what I decided. I'm like, yes, I'm afraid. I'm not going to reject that fear, but I'm not going to let it hold me back from doing what I really want to do and what speaks to me and my soul.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. It's so good to chat with you, Samara. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you. And friends, thank you so much for watching. And as always, my friends, don't forget,
make beautiful shit happen.
continue to make beautiful shit happen, my friends. All right, we will see you